having dyslexia, you guys. If anyone here has dyslexia, it's actually when you're dyslexic, it makes you better at pattern recognition, which is actually most of what structure is pattern recognition. So I'm now very happy that I have dyslexia, because I think it's one of the reasons why I'm really, really good at finding unique structures in people's writings and making those work. Another, like, I'm also ADD, and that at first a lot of people told me was going to be a problem, but I'm like, no, like, it actually makes it easier for me to teach and like meet with 7 different writers in one day. And I actually work on about 7 projects at once. And most people don't have the energy for that, because ADD is not about a lack of energy. It's about you having too much energy. And so it actually helps me a lot for both my writing and my teaching. And so, and if you have a brain difference, or if you're like bipolar, PTSD, you guys, I've got it all. Like, all of these brain differences actually have really cool advantages, and you don't, the only thing that's damaging is that the general program of how most people tell you how to write a script is for an average brain. So if your brain isn't average and it's different like mine, most of what people are going to tell you won't work for your brain, which is how I found most of these approaches and workarounds. Was that I was like, everything everyone told me about screenwriting, I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't work with my brain. Like, I feel things in my body more than I hear them or see them in my mind. And so a lot of this is just coming through how I figured out to, you know, to find a way into writing a great screenplay that feels more natural and works with my brain, rather than telling my brain it needs to change. OCD, actually, you guys, there's a great book called The Power of Different. It's like white and it has a rainbow different, I think, on it, and a head brain thing. And it goes through the most common brain differences, and it tells you like what might be difficult about it, and then like what the advantages and the workarounds are. And I definitely recommend that if you know anyone who's on the spectrum, anyone with OCD, anyone who wants to write dyslexia, it's a really empowering book that gives you really specific things of what to do to work with your brain, rather than feeling like, you know, you can't do what you want to do because your brain is a little bit different. Awesome. Yeah, so I think it's The Power of Different, I believe, if someone wants to Google it. Again, I believe it's white with a rainbow different. Oh God, I want to say salts or something is salts. You guys can see how my brain is starting to, oh good, someone found it. Wonderful. Lovely. You guys are so fabulous. Yes, Gail Salts. Yes, I knew it was something about salt. I remember thinking of Salt Shaker, and I was like, there's something with salt with the name of that writer. It's a lovely book. And if you don't have a brain difference, but you know someone who does, who, again, like it can be so empowering to give someone that, like, hey, like, it's totally possible. Like, you know, I was like the last person to learn how to read in my family, like no one ever thought I would ever become a writer, but you know, I started in poetry, and the great thing about poetry is you screw grammar and spelling. Poetry is all about how it feels. And that gave me that entrance into then theater. And then I tripped ass backwards into screenwriting, which I never wanted to do, but then I saw the paycheck and I was like, yes, I will do this. Cause I just figured I'd be poor my whole life. And then I was like, oh. Good. I have a gift for writing and using words. So I say, yes, you probably do. Yay, poetry writers, you guys. If you haven't dabbled in poetry, to me, film is more like poetry and theater is more like novels. So if you've never thought about exploring poetry, I actually recommend, I mean, listen, like, I have a hard time reading some poetry, because I'm just like, oh God, you know, it's poetry. But writing it, and you know, it can be really, really amazing, because there's so many different styles. And the thing I love about poetry is that it's almost like usually I catch myself in this feeling and I don't understand it. And so I write the poem to be like, how could I make someone else feel what I'm feeling at this moment? It's just about that one moment, that one feeling. And it's amazing what you find. And then when someone reads it and they feel that, it's like our emotions are really so complicated that a single word doesn't sum it up. It's like you have to create this experience. And for a moment, you're like, oh, someone else is feeling exactly what I'm feeling. And that's so validating and it feels so good. And I feel like on a bigger level, that's really what film is doing. Great films. Like you realize you're in this theater or even just at home, but you're like, everyone who's watching this is like, we enter into this same emotional little space. And for a moment, you're like, oh, I'm not alone. Because so much of our life is just, of being a human being, is just numbing the sensation of feeling alone. And yes, like a shared dream. And I think that film is so much more like that, where, you know, you have that, like when I saw someone brought up, I think Melancholia in the thing earlier. And I remember when I watched the movie Melancholia, I was like, I felt seen. I was like, yes, like I'm that person. I'm the person where it's like, everyone else is like, this is super fun and awesome. And I'm like, I am a miserable mess. And then the end of the world happens and I'm like, la, 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 like, what's, you know, I'm like, how, I just have such weird reactions, you know, because of the way my brain is. And I was like, thank you, Lars, for seeing me. And I think that's what beautiful film does, is it gives, and that's why it's like, you don't want to please everyone with your films. I know plenty of people hate that film. And that's great. It's not for them. It's for people like me, you know? And I just like some of Steven Spielberg's work, I understand it's brilliant. But growing up the way I grew up, there's just like this like clean, happy, upper middle class, like just that I like, sometimes I'm like, I just can't buy it. I can't buy into that dream. That wasn't real for me as a kid, you know? Is it a great movie? Yes. But you have to remember, your opinion, what you like, and of something being good are two totally different things. You know, like E.T. is a great movie. I love the script. I love the script more than the movie. Great. So smart. Don't like the movie. Don't enjoy watching it. Not going to watch it again. That's okay. That's just my silly little opinion. I just don't like the way the puppet is, the E.T. He creeps me out. He makes me feel a little uncomfortable. That's my weird little bump on that. But the good thing to take out of that, you guys, is don't try to please everyone with your work. Find the audience that will be seen the most by your script and by your story, and take care of them, and let everyone else just like go find something else, you know? Usually later in my writing process, I'll do an entire draft where I just visualize the like who is my audience, like who are the people that need this film. And I'll do an entire draft where I just go through and I just watch them react to the story, and I'll make adjustments on like, you know, that might be interpreted the wrong way. And it's a really little beautiful meditative tool you can use of going into a movie theater and visualizing, you know, all the people who will be seen and who will be helped and who will be grateful for this work, and watching them watch your film and seeing how they react and making any adjustments if needed. That would be awesome.
I have a question on 6 from Robert. You mentioned on number 6, there's no right or wrong in art. I have a hard time making my protagonist do things I personally don't approve of, even though it's probably the best choice for the scene.
Okay. Yes, I know this can be hard. A lot of times, sometimes when I read a script and I realize it's not where it needs to be, I'm like, this is a really good person. Like the person writing the script is really like they care, they're polite. Like this is someone who is always aware of other people's emotions. And that's good for you as a human being. When you start writing your script, you want to create a safe space with clear boundaries. And you can, because there's a part of you that is repressed, that is the angry child. If you guys haven't done Jungian shadow work, look into it. It's awesome and it does great stuff for your writing. There's a part of you that does want to do the bad things, that does want to cause a scene, that does want to yell back. And if you can create a safe boundary where you're like, hey, shadow part of me that wants to destroy everything, here you are king. Here you can do whatever you want. Here I encourage you. And and they'll be so happy. They'll be like, thank you, yes. And then they'll do like tons of really cool stuff. And then when you stop writing, they're like, thanks, Dad. And they'll go back and then you can go out in the world and still be like a very kind, good human being that cares about other people and is aware of themselves. But yeah, like, see what happens if you actually start visualizing that part of yourself, right? Because I think a lot of times it's hard because people don't want to accept that there is a part of them that feels that way. And the refusal to accept and see that part of yourself is actually what makes it more likely for it to burst out. But if you create a safe space, like, this is why I write thrillers, you guys. Like, I think you've learned I'm pretty freaking peppy and upbeat. So why is it all my, like some of the one review I got on my work was, what must have happened to Miss Hinds in her childhood to make her think that anyone would want to watch such dark and disgusting acts of violence? Which I know he meant as a bad review, but I personally thought that was like one of the best reviews I've ever gotten, because I was like, the right audience is going to be like, need to go see her work. But you know, the page is the place where all the parts of me that I'm like, you're not going to be good for interacting with people, I let them come out and play in the script. And that's why it's like there's murders and deaths and stabbings, and you know, because like that exists in me. I had a shitty childhood. That's not true. There was some good things about my childhood, but like shit happened to me as a kid. Okay, a lot of weird stuff happened to me in my 20s. I'm sure, like you guys, I'm sure you all have things in your past that you're like, woof, the world hit me hard for a while. Like that was crappy, you know? Weird stuff, you know? And I can't deny it, you know? So it started going into my work. You know, my first play was about killing my mom and having sex on top of her dead body. Now, do I want to kill my mom? No, I love my mom. We actually have a great relationship now. But there was I got blamed so much for acting out sexually when I wasn't even sexually active. You know, I was raised in a very religious home. And so my first script was me just working out like my anger at the fact that I kept being punished for something I wasn't doing. And, you know, that's one of the great things about the stories we tell. And when you see a film that moves you, that's what someone has put into the piece. That's why those first drafts, who cares if it's spelled right? Who cares if the structure is fully there yet? Get that onto the page of like, how is this about me? Because even if you're writing about, you know, Bobby on planet Zoopsorp, you're telling your story through a character. It should be your emotional truth told through the realities of the character for the benefit and entertainment of your audience. Right? And so I would say spending some time to get to know in a non-judgmental way the part of yourself that feels uncomfortable or unsafe, allowing your character to do those things. And I would move slowly with it and maybe just start with, actually everyone can do this. If everyone, now the part of you that scares you most may not be something dark and twisted. The part of me that scared me most the last time I did this exercise was the part of me that wanted to believe in love. So this isn't what other people think is repressed or not, or good or bad, but what part of you are you like, oh, I don't look at that part of me, or I don't want that part of me to come out? It, you know, but if you just allow yourself to look at it at the corner of your eye, so some of you might actually be seeing something and some of you might actually be feeling it. I feel it more than I see it sometimes. If you were to sit down and like ask that part of yourself, would they like something to drink? Whatever they want, you can give it to them. If they ask for a whiskey, give them a whiskey. If they ask for apple juice, give them apple juice. And if you give them this drink or whatever they ask for, and you realize you can sit here next to them and you can start to ask them questions, and you can write down what they say. And so you might start with a question like, don't worry about what I want, but what do you feel I need to know? And let them talk. And you just listen. And if you just keep asking very non-judgmental, open questions, and with the goal of, let me get to know this part of myself, usually what you'll find is it's not as scary or dark or whatever it is. The reason you're avoiding it, it's not as far along as you think it is. Most of the time you start to realize it's a younger part of yourself. It's like you scared as a kid trying to protect yourself somehow. And then you can start to build a relationship with that part of yourself, you know, and allow them to come out and play in ways that feel very safe and effective for your writing. So that's, if you're interested in that, that's a little bit easier to do. Like, that's the meditative side of things we do in the meditative workshop. If that stuff is of interest to you, that would be a good place to look at, because doing like full-on meditations for that is really, really helpful. But I would also say that if anyone's struggling with like letting their characters do something or going down a certain road with their characters, is just to know that the worst thing that could happen is you write it and then you read it and you don't like it and you rewrite it. It's the worst thing that can happen. It does not automatically get emailed to the New York Times. It does not automatically get read and ridiculed by your family. You never have to show those pages to any human being. And creating a safe space for you to explore and go down roads that aren't right for your script and are difficult for you are a really important part of the process, because bravery is one of the most valuable things that you can develop as a screenwriter. It takes bravery to put your stories on paper. It takes bravery to reread your scripts. It takes bravery to go in and do that work, draft after draft after draft. It takes bravery to send it out and have it be judged by the world. It has bravery to say yes to getting it made. It has bravery to seeing it made on a screen and then going, oh, now what? Now I have to do it all over again. What if the next one isn't as good as the first one? Like, bravery will be required for every step of the process, whether you stay an emerging writer or you end up making 180 films by the time that you pass this time on the earth. So cultivating that, definitely, you can practice bravery specifically and get better and better at it, just the way that you practice dialogue or you practice scene structure or you practice anything else. Yeah, and the great thing about practicing bravery, you can do it at any time. You can do it every single day. You don't need anyone around you. You can just practice doing the brave thing when you sit down and write every single time.
Can you use this list for multiple drafts over and over? Can you use it for outlines and things before you even get to a draft?
I mean, you can definitely use it on any scene at any part of the process. I will tell you, I don't mind outlining if it's done effectively with the way that the brain works. The way that most people outline forces them into a place where they actually are incapable of using their creativity neurologically. So a lot of times people say, like, I'm anti-outline. I'm not. I outline in between every draft. This little summary is an outline. What I do not believe in is, before you even write a first draft, before you've had a conversation with your characters, is sitting down and spending months plotting out your script, outlining your script, because you don't want to feel uncomfortable during the writing process. That will never give you a great script. It will it could possibly give you a mediocre average script. But the reason why it's damaging neurologically is that, first of all, what works in the outline rarely works effectively on the page. It's a completely different beast. The other thing is that most people, when they're doing an outline, they're using the part of their brain that only has access to things they've already seen before. True active creativity is coming from a different system in the brain, and those two systems cannot operate at the same time. So you end up outlining something that is really just a Mad Lib version of something you've already seen. The other thing about if you spend too much time working on it is that then you get in what behavioral economics talks about how illogical we are when we've sunk a lot of time or money into something. We will make horrible choices for the end product. So if you spent 3 months working on an outline, you become so neurologically attached to that outline that then when something's going on in your script and it's like the outline's not working and your characters provide you with a better option that's different from the outline, most people are going to neurologically still want to protect the investment they put into the outline. And so you're going to end up with a shittier script. So, creativity is born out of emotion, not out of intellect. When most people outline, they're going to what makes sense, what's logical. Human beings by nature are not logical. We have the capacity to use logic. It's one of the most recent advancements in our brain, but naturally we do not automatically use reason and logic. We respond emotionally and instinctually. So to go in and create this beautiful looking outline that makes sense is to be untrue to human behavior, which can look really pretty at first and make you feel very safe going into the script, but proves problematic once you're really in it. And you're like, this character would never actually do that. Oh, that just actually doesn't feel great. So I find a lot of times why people sink a lot of time into outlines before they ever start writing comes from the fact that either they were told that's how it's done, which is the stupidest reason to do anything. If everyone's doing it, then you should probably be doing something else, because the whole point of this is you need to be different than everyone. I mean, it's easier to teach. I know that's why some people teach it, because it's easier to teach outline than it is to help people like actually write their scripts. But there is a way to outline. And again, this idea of like, I'm just trying not to waste any time. If you're doing it because you're like, I don't want to waste time. If you're outlining because you're like, I don't want to get lost. If you're outlining because you're like, I want to make sure I'm going in the right direction all the time. Those are just going to get in your way of writing a good script. It is better to spend that time and energy to say, I want to practice being comfortable getting lost in my script. I want to practice being okay, feeling overworked and underwhelmed, and learning how to listen and find the right things to do to move forward. I want to become excited by the level of difficulty and effort that I put into it. It really is similar to being a mountain climber. Like, do you want to be a mountain climber, or do you want to get to the top of a mountain? A lot of writers are like, I just want to get to the top of the mountain. I don't care how I get there. Like, I'll take a helicopter. And I'm like, if you're the person who would take the helicopter rather than be like, let me spend 3 months climbing this mountain, you're probably not going to ever get paid to do this. The people who are going to end up getting paid are the people who are like, I love the cold. I love the rock on my hand. The people who find a way to fall in love with getting lost and finding your way through again. And so that's my little rant on why neurologically and emotionally it's not helpful to spend tons of time outlining to get it right and figure it out. That being said, if you don't spend a crap load of time and you just create what I call a meditative quick outline at the beginning, you're fine. If you spend maybe just like, I don't know, a day, and you visualize instead of think, and create like, not a super specific like 40-page thing, but if you're like, okay, let me just hit like 20 moments. And if you just visualize and you're like, let me find 20 cool moments that feels not only right for this piece, but like, ooh, exciting. now you've created a little meditative outline, and it's more about the images you see. And that's your unconscious artistry giving you gifts, saying yes. And then you just put it down. You're like, oh, all I need to do is write, you know, it's like they're islands. And you're like, I just need to swim between each island. And then eventually you'll have that first draft. So I understand that some people like, I'm a crazy person. I love just being like, I jump into the character. I don't even know like in the script I'm in right now, I don't know what genre it is. I don't even know if it's a play or a screenplay. I am completely surrendering to my character. And I'm like, I will discover all that when I discover it. My last script, I think on page 70, I realized it was a sci-fi. I had no idea. I understand most people aren't going to be trusting themselves that much. It's great if you do it. It's super fun. So if you are someone who's like, I feel like I do need a little bit of a roadmap, just shrink the amount of time and make sure you're being really visual with it rather than thinking. You know, thinking is a thin feeling, but the visual fantasy, and you're writing down those images of these key moments in the story. That way you're working with the way your brain works rather than fighting against it to try to get creative. So you're not losing your creativity to serve your feelings of safety. You can feel safe enough to move forward without losing all of that creativity and having to fight against, you know, so many people. You guys wrote about how being attached to things. You know, attachment comes with time. It comes with the experience you put in, right? Like, has anyone ever been in a relationship with someone where you're like, I hate this person. I hate them. Like literally, like them and Jeffrey Dahmer. I hate them, but I'm still not going to break up with them because I've spent 8 years with them and I don't want to give up the amount of time I put in. I don't want to feel like the past 8 years of my life were a complete waste. Or maybe it's not a person, maybe it's a job. Anyone? Am I the only one? Maybe for some of you guys, you're really good at being like, nope, I'll walk away. But most human beings, the way we were raised and the attachment that we have, it's quite difficult. So I will say, but here's the thing. No, it's never wasted time, Avery. That's a story you're telling yourself. Because here's the thing. You know, there's two things happening whenever you're writing a script. You're working on the script itself, but you're also working on you as a writer. So even if the pages you write for 3 weeks, even if you spend 3 weeks writing in one direction, and then you write something, you go, no, no, that's not right. And you're like, all of that I'm not going to use. It hasn't been a waste of time to write because A, you would have never found it unless you allowed yourself to write in that direction. So it helps you get to where you need to go in the script. And B, every time you write, you're practicing becoming a better writer. Your craft and your artistry and your habits are becoming stronger and stronger. It's just like if you're an athlete. If you go and you lose a game, yeah, maybe the game didn't go well, but you still are a better athlete for having played and clocked those hours. And there are things you can learn about that game that can help move you forward, right? So as long as you're writing, it's never a waste. It's never, ever a waste when you're writing. It's always moving forward. It's always leading to a deeper understanding. And even if it doesn't move the project forward, you're always going to be moving yourself forward as a writer. And that will keep you from becoming a jaded jerk. Because people can get jaded when they get writing. Like a lot of pro writers, actually I find more emerging writers get attached to the idea that every project they write should be successful. Most of my pro writers are pretty good about being like, I don't know, like 1 out of every 10 is actually going to do something. And, that's, yes, Thomas Edison. I didn't fail 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. The process of inventing the light bulb took 1,000 steps. Absolutely. Also, you guys, Mozart and Einstein are two creators who most people are like, oh my God, they're so brilliant. And they were so brilliant at such a young age. And what you don't know is that both of them started creating much younger. So it's absolutely true. It's like they just, like the amount of papers that Einstein wrote before the one that actually got published and was good was like 1,000. And you know, Mozart started composing when he was 5, but all of his best work wasn't till he was in his 20s, which means he was spending over a decade writing stuff that everyone's like, that's good for being a 5-year-old. That's good for being a 5-year-old. So it's really important, especially because is anyone out there like, oh, like I should be further along than I am right now. I'm too old. Gosh, I hear that a lot. I heard it from a 22-year-old yesterday. A 22-year-old was like, I feel like I'm too old to make it in this industry. And I was like, wow, you know, but I know, because when I was 22, I thought the same thing. When I was 18, I was like, oh my God, the best poets have already won an award by the time they're 16. How could I, you know, yeah, forget about it. When you send your script out, it doesn't have your age on it, you guys. No one cares, all right? Especially now, we just want good work. But it is important to know that, like, even the Beatles, you know, if, you know, they played so much more than most bands play together before they ever made it big. It really is just about clocking the hours and getting the experience in. And if you just decide, I'm going to write 150 scripts before I die, it's a numbers game. And you know what? Out of all your 150 scripts, at least one of them has to be your worst. And if it's the one you're currently working on, cool. But if you want to write, you want to write for the rest of your life, then who cares if some of them make it or not, right? But know that if you put your heart and soul into it, you're like, I cannot guarantee this script will get sold or will get made. But you can always guarantee and choose to be like, I'm going to put my heart and soul into it so that I grow and develop as an artist. I had my first script shot, produced, and aired on CBS procedural at 56 years old. Thank you, Bobby. Fabulous. Awesome. But yeah, every time you write, be like, I can't control whether someone buys this or not. I can't control if this gets optioned. What I can control is that I put my heart and soul into it, that I grow as an artist as I'm writing it, and that I have a healthy relationship with my artistic self so that I'm not beating myself up and being abusive to myself. Ooh, what questions should we ask when we revise characters? Well, I'm a firm believer that your characters are all fractured parts of your own identity and that they're real and they exist inside of you. So I don't think that we really need to build or revise characters. I just feel like we need to get to know them. Like maybe you were introduced by a friend who's like, she's kind of a bitch. And then you spend more time and you realize, oh, she's not really a bitch. She's just misunderstood. So I would say spending more time with your characters. You want to spend time so you can get to know them for the truth of who they are. And I will give you guys a series. Yes, I was about to give you exercises. Fabulous. You guys are reading my mind. It's like we're all becoming one. I'm going to give you guys now a series of scenes to write to get to know your characters in the most effective way possible. This is super fun. I call this character research. It's more important than any technical research that you might do. If you write these moments, obviously not all of them will apply to everyone, especially if you have like a child, but let's just say you're working with adult characters. If you write these scenes and you surrender to the truth of your character and what their life is or was, and you experience it with them and you don't try to dictate and control it, all you have to do is write these scenes and suddenly you're going to start feeling your character and know them the way that you know your best friend or that you know a sibling, right? Because how do you get to know people? You don't write down information about them. Like, you guys can read my bio, but like, that doesn't mean you know me. Spending 1 minute in this class with me, you will know me better than reading 5 pages of my resume, right? So you need to spend time with your characters and feel the way that they react to things. So are you all ready? You're gonna write this down? Okay. Awesome scenes to write to discover and get to know your characters. That also has the possibility of you building the structure of your entire screenplay off of some of these scenes. So that's awesome. Animals are amazing. I'm just saying that to everyone. All right, so write the first time your character discovered sex. Write the first time your character fell in love. And don't choose it, write it as a full scene. Pretend like you're dropping into their life and you're watching it happen in front of you. Like you're a little fly on the wall. Write the moment, the first time your character's parents or parental figures fell off the pedestal. Yeah, discovered sex is different than having sex. Two different scenes, but you can write them both. They're both good. The way your character first does something creates a neural pathway, which creates the definition of that thing in the brain of the person. I'm going to say that in a clear way. When you do something for the first time, it creates a neural pathway, which sort of creates the unconscious definition of what your body believes that thing is, whether that's true or not. So to give you an example, by, again, throwing myself onto the flames, the first time I looked at having a relationship in my life, my home life wasn't quite good. And my mom wasn't able to take care of me the way that I would have been healthy. So I needed to find someone. I was like, I don't know how to get to school because it was like a 15-minute drive to school. And I'm like, I can't walk 3 hours to school every day. And because of what my parents had demonstrated to me in their relationships, I started looking around and being like, oh, who would be useful to date? So my first relationship, I was looking for someone who wouldn't hurt me and had a car. And so for my 20s, that became the definition of what's a good relationship, is someone who won't hurt me and someone that's convenient. And surprise, surprise, in my 20s, I didn't really fall in love a lot. But I dated a lot of people who weren't going to hurt me and were really convenient for me to date. So until I went in and did some therapy and took care of that stuff, you know. So discovering the first time your character does things is really great to understand what's the unconscious definition that might not be accurate, that might be causing the problems that this film is about them overcoming. Is really cool. So more scenes to write. Write a moment where your character's life is threatened and discover how they respond. Write the first time your character remembers experiencing public shame. Write the way that your character doing karaoke. I swear to God, this one you'll learn so much about anyone if you're just like, how do you do karaoke? If you're me, you just drink heavily and hide in the back of a bar and just wish it was over. Right, did I already say the first time your character really falls in love? And then also the first time they fall in love and that love is reciprocated, if that's happened. So the first time your character feels like love beyond, post-adolescence, that may not even be with a person, that may be with the lake or with a job, right? But just, write your character's fantasies. Oh, yes, write their fantasies. What do they fantasize about? Write their sexual fantasies, but also write their like normal everyday fantasies. You will learn so much about your character because we only fantasize about things we think we do not have. All right. So when I was a kid, most of my daydream fantasies that you don't really choose, they just sort of happen to you. Most of my day fantasies were like, I lose my legs. My family all dies. I come down with an incurable disease. And at first I was like, oh my God, I'm so dark and messed up. But then when I realized what all those fantasies had in common was that people would come up to me in the fantasy and they'd be like, wow, you're so extraordinary for the way you're getting through this. And I realized that I wasn't fantasizing about pain and misery. I was fantasizing about being extraordinary. And so that means I don't think I'm extraordinary, but I want to be extraordinary. And so I realized that that's really what like young Jessica was, is just someone who wanted so bad to be exceptional, but didn't actually believe that she was. And so almost all of my actions, that's why I was the president of every club, y'all. I was the choreographer for the choir. I was the president of the Thespian Society. I was the lead in every single play. Like, I was like, I must be great. And if you are out there, you must be great. It must be because you don't actually believe you already are. And to discover that for your character, like, that's what my arc was, is when I finally learned that, you know, I don't need, you know, that I am extraordinary without having to be the president of every club. And so again, when you do these fantasy works, or when you go in and you find these moments of truth, when you just think you're getting to know your character, but what you're really doing is you're finding these little wounds from the past, or these little egos that get created, that are actually the key to building big structure in a screenplay. Big structure that is based off of the truth of human psychology and the specificity of who your character is, the uniqueness of who they are, rather than looking at structure as, on this page do this, on this page meet a gatekeeper, on this, you know, which just, first of all, does not sound fun to me, but is also just not true to the way that human beings arc. Like, we change, we develop. The stories we tell from our own lives are when some issue from our past that we are ignoring starts to become impossible to ignore, and we either have to face it and overcome it, or it swallows us up, and it's a very sad story. So yeah, those are a bunch of good scenes to write from childhood, but also things like getting to know the relationships. What was your character's relationship to their mother? Write the scene that's the epitome of that. What's your character's relationship to father? Even if your character doesn't have a mother or a father, since those are norms in our society, the lack thereof is still something you need to understand, right? So in America, if your character's born in America, religion is big for most people. Even if your character was born not in religion, they still have a relationship to religion, because that is the norm in our society. So writing that character's childhood relationship to religion, writing your character's relationship to money. What's the epitome of what's their relationship to money? Writing your character's relationship to sex, writing your character's relationship to the government. Writing your character's relationship to morality and ethics, and those are two different things. Google it. It can be really amazing and fun to discover the truth of your character and really get to know them. The other good thing about this is that once you do this, they will trust you so much, because you're like, oh my God, this writer actually wants to get to know me and the real me. They don't want to just puppet me around. And so then when you go, all you have to do is go meet up with your character, and they will show you the film, and it becomes much easier to write it. You don't have to make so many decisions. Your characters just start taking over, and you're like, oh, cool, I guess I'm just going to write down everything that they do. What was your character's relationship? Oh yeah, that's the thing. Character's relationship to people in authority versus strangers. Yes, absolutely. Like, a lot of us will either treat, like, when it comes to people you know versus strangers, we tend to be very strong on either we're like super polite to strangers and can lash out at people we love really close to us, or we can be like complete dickheads to strangers and not care. And that really just comes from how you were raised and what was demoed for you. And so that can be really interesting to watch. Putting your character in different moral situations and seeing what happens. Like, if they find a wallet with $500, what do they do with it? Right? Put your character on a plane. There's plane trouble. Everyone thinks it's going down. How does your character respond? You'll get some truth out of that. If you want to get to know people, all you have to do is spend time with them in really dramatic situations. Like, I moved to New York City September 9th, 2001. I got to know my roommate really, really well in the first week. We became best friends because of it. When you go through something, you know, first time leaving the house, like little 17-year-old Jess, I didn't even realize that like I thought the most expensive store in the world was Gap. and the most expensive restaurant was Olive Garden. Like, I didn't know that like Louis Vuitton was like a thing. I just thought it was like pretty pictures in a magazine. Yeah, like I got to know, you know, like, so putting your characters through crazy circumstances and just experiencing it with them, like, you'll get to know them in a way that will make the writing of your script so much easier. Like, if you knew your characters, most of the time I feel like the structure of stories don't work because people don't really understand and know their characters well enough. So taking the time to get to know them, even if you're in like a 4th draft right now, great. Do 3 days of writing, moving story forward, and 2 days of character exploration to get to know them and deepen your emotional intelligence. It's gonna work. Yeah, it is fun to hang out with your characters. It's true. And oh, bring your characters to work. You guys, just because you're not writing doesn't mean you can't have your characters with you. Like right now, I just pulled up 3 of my characters. Jonathan, Naveen, and Lil are now standing behind me, and they are very mad at me because I haven't visited them in a while. But they think you guys are really interesting and fascinating. They also have never seen a computer, so they're very, very confused right now. But they can feel your energy. But like, you can bring your characters with you all the time. When I'd have stupid, boring meetings, I would always bring my character John, because he always walks around with a really big hunting knife, and it always makes me smile to imagine a producer with a giant knife to their throat if they're saying something I don't particularly like. That makes me feel good. Would you do this character work before you write or after? Character, I say during, right? So write and move your story forward. When you hit a wall, go do some character work. Let it give you that motivation and movement to go, then move forward. And then when you hit it right, it should be like this. Every script, you move forward, you hit a wall. If you're staring at the screen more than 10 minutes, boop, go back and discover something about your character. Look for something in that makes you go, oh, that's how I'm going to get past that thing. And it's really more of this like infinity fishtail thing that happens where you go back and forth and move story forward, go back and discover, move story forward, go back and discover. If you try to do just all character discovery at first, it's just going to start to become information in your head rather than experiences and feeling. And you want to move more towards experience and feeling propelling you forward. All the information in the world, actually, intellectual understanding can get in the way of creativity. They've had a lot of really interesting studies on that. This is why some of the best actors in the world, you can meet them and be like, you're kind of dumb. Because they don't have a lot going up in there, you know, but intellectual knowledge of something can often get in the way of creativity with it, because it gets you into an intellectual way of thinking, which is a different system of the mind than your emotional creative thinking. And creativity comes out of emotion. So I'd rather have you have an emotional experience with your character and let that build story. You don't even need to intellectually understand it. Just feel it with them and have that lead you forward. That will give you a better script than if you intellectually understand everything about your character, but then you sit down to write and it's going to come out as very cliche and stagnant. And, you know, yeah, like, we don't need you to write an essay about your characters. We need to see their life and their emotions on the page and on the screen.
There are a couple people asking about revising dialogue and how to make effective dialogue.
Yes, I love this. Okay. You guys, dialogue comes back to, again, how did language develop in the brain? I know you guys have been thinking about it for the past 2 weeks. You're like, how did language develop in our brain? Here's the thing. For thousands of years, human beings did not have language because we didn't need it. We were fine. We were in groups of maybe 15 to 20 people. And when someone wanted to sleep with you, you could tell. And when someone wanted your food, you could tell. When someone was angry at you, you could tell. And when someone was pooping, you could tell. And hopefully you left them alone, because, like, let them poop in the woods by themselves. But then we changed to being like, let's stay in one place and let's start growing things. And we started needing more and more people to be able to make that work. And so then we had to start building like structures and stuff. And so suddenly we had this period where we needed to start to organize people and control them and manipulate them. And that's when language started developing in the brain. So if we understand that the only purpose behind language that initially created it was to manipulate other people, one of the easiest things you can do to make your writing more amazing is sit down and be like, every single time my character opens their mouth, they are trying to manipulate the person they're talking to. In order to understand how they're manipulating them, you have to know what they want from the other person. Goes back to what we started talking about at the top of class. What does your character want from the other person? The words that they use, the diction and the syntax should be dependent upon what they want from the character, what they think will work on this character, and the way that they are manipulating that character. Now that sounds bad, but just know, my job, people pay me to manipulate them with my words. I manipulate you into being exciting about your project. I will only manipulate you in a way that you ask, but it is true. Manipulation is not good or bad, it's how you use it. So your character, every time they open their mouth, you just say, who are they trying to manipulate? And the way that they manipulate that person will be dependent upon what they think of that person. Like, if I go up and I'm like, ooh, Brad, look at those big muscles. Ooh, you're so strong. Okay, so I'm choosing to manipulate Brad by lionizing and complimenting him. And the way I'm doing it is very superficial, which means you can easily tell, like, do I think Brad is smart? No. So just from one little line of dialogue, you can be like, this is what they want, this is how they're manipulating, and the way they're manipulating reveals how they feel about that other character, right? So the number one thing about this I can say is that if you're using dialogue to communicate something to your audience, you're not doing it well. No, dialogue, everything that you need to communicate to your audience happens in the action. The dialogue is also an action, but the benefit of dialogue, what an audience experiences from the dialogue, is not information. It's not what the words are actually saying. They're experiencing, how is this character manipulating this other character? What do they want? And it's them understanding, being able to mind read what this person thinks of this person because of the way they're talking to them. I'm sure you do this in real life. You go to a coffee shop and you see the way that someone talks to their spouse and you immediately are like, ooh, right? So that's really the best thing to think about when you play around with dialogue is, what does the character want from the other character? What is the tactic they're going to use with the dialogue? And is that tactic an accurate representation of what they feel? Because, like, why would you use a tactic on someone you didn't think would work? I would never use, you know, vapid vein on someone who I didn't think it would work on them, right? And so if you think it works on them, then you're like, oh, that must mean you think that that would work on them. Yeah, bad dialogue is one of the worst things because, like, you can just, everyone, even though most people don't know how to write good dialogue, everyone can tell what bad dialogue is, which makes it kind of fun and amazing. But another thing I'll tell you to warn you guys is don't be too judgmental, because you have to understand that something working or not, or being effective or not, completely depends upon what the author's intent is. Like, let me ask you this. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a line of dialogue. You guys write in, either write good or bad. Either it's a good line of dialogue or it's bad dialogue, okay? Jonathan, how dare you step foot in this house after 52 years of ignoring every email I sent, even after I gave up my child for you back on planet Zoop Zorp, after you abandoned my mother and killed my sister. It's so much fun. First of all, you guys, if you ever write bad dialogue and you realize, I want you to do that. I want you to read it out loud like that and make it fun. Because it's okay. Everyone writes bad dialogue. And when you do that, your ego, when you play, your ego disappears and you're like, cool. Right? I don't have to show this to anyone. Yes, it's a big exposition dump. But you guys, what if I told you this was a movie that was a mockumentary about the making of the world's worst film? Now, is that good dialogue or bad dialogue? Right. Now, suddenly the same exact line, when you look at what's around it, when you see it in context, is absolutely fabulous. This is, again, why I hesitate about getting notes from people you can't have a conversation with. When you understand the context of something that seemed really great could become really not effective, and something that could be effective could be really effective. And when you're reading your own work, also, if you read something, you're like, wow, this scene is terrible. Maybe it is. Or if you look at what's around it, maybe it works. Like oftentimes in a first draft, if you're trusting your artistry, you could write a scene and you're like, this will never work. I'm writing a realistic script. And in this scene, my character literally turns into a tiger and attacks someone. That can't go in my script. I'm shooting this for $100,000. I can't afford a tiger, and it's a realistic film. What a bad scene. Unless you look at it, and you look at what's around it, and you realize, oh, that was a metaphor. How can my character turn into a tiger within the truth of the existence that they're in? And that's how Tennessee Williams got one of the most famous moments in Streetcar Named Desire, where Stanley goes, "Rawr, tiger," and attacks Blanche. There's really no good or bad. There's just it works or it doesn't. Or it works or it doesn't, not yet. Or it works, but not for the world I'm in. How can I translate it into the world I'm in? But what I see mostly is that that most writers have tons and tons of creativity and awesome instincts, but this very limited, rigid understanding of what they think screenwriting is, they end up looking at their early drafts and judging them on what they think a final draft is, or what they've seen before, and throwing away some of their most beautiful, amazing moments that just need to be turned around and looked at from a different angle. So that's why I want you guys to like trust that artistry and just be like, there's a certain amount in the rewriting process, which is the magical phrase I'll give you is, this isn't working yet. If there is something in your script that you love, that you feel connected to, and I will say this, check for, is it ego or is it art? The reason you get attached to things in your script, there's only two reasons. It's either artistically, it's valuable, or your ego doesn't want to let it go. So you have to be honest and be like, is this ego or is this art? But if you find it and you're like, no, this is the art, then just be like, all right, it doesn't work yet. Now you know exactly what to work on over the next few weeks. I need to play around not just with the scene, but what's around the scene. What's the context of this moment? And say, can I play around with that to keep this artistic moment and have it finally translate to my audience? And I've had moments like that with my script that took months to figure out. Again, as long as you know the difference between, and if you don't know yet, start practicing and discover. Is it ego or is it art? Is this my lack of desire to feel like I've wasted time? Or is this actually the artistic part of me that's like, no, this is an important part of this story. Like, this is part of what I want to really communicate. And you have to be really honest with yourself. It's not easy to do. It's really, really not. It's easier. Like, I can teach a monkey how to format a screenplay quicker than some people, you know, because it's part of the human condition. But it's possible. And it's a great question to ask. You might even want to just write it on a Post-it and put it on your wall where you write, be like, ego or art, ? You know, and only you can sort of hold yourself fully responsible for that. Writing dialogue, not your first language. Ooh, yes, write it in your first language and translate it afterwards. You do not have to do everything at once. Absolutely recommend writing in the original language. I mean, I've had writers do both. I've worked with a lot of writers from around the world where English is like sometimes their fourth language. For some of those writers, writing it just in their language first and then translating it, it kind of depends on what language grammatically and structurally lends itself to seeing something in your mind's eye and putting it down as quickly as possible. So like my experience with sort of Spanish speakers versus German has been very, very different because there's such a difference there. I type in wingdings First of all, can we just talk how Wingdings is the best named font ever? Right. So I would say write it. If you know you can, if you feel confident writing it if you're like, when I write in my native tongue, it's beautiful. When I write it in English, it comes out, then just start with your native tongue and just be like, I would say I would wait until, unless you need to share it with a group or with someone who doesn't speak that language, I would just wait till my second to last draft. And I would just translate and then just do an entire draft where all you do is go through and play with the translation. And that's even something where it's like, sit down with one of your friends who's like, a native English speaker and just be like, okay, I want to say this, but in, my tongue, there's this, metaphor thing under writing it, like, and you can work with people to help on the translation of that. But I would do an entire draft focusing on that, which, we're coming up to time, but one of the most valuable things I can also tell you guys is, the brain can really only do a few things at a time. So when every single time you rewrite your script, which it will be many times, and just be okay with it'll take many times, define and clarify the intention and the goal with which the rewrite. Do not just go in and say, I'm going to make everything better, or like, you need measurable goals. So I will go through and I'll do my first rewrite is always like, do I have everything for my story and character? If that works, then my next rewrite is, am I taking care of my structure? And then my next rewrite might be like, let me take care of my plot. And then the next rewrite might be like, let me work on my relationship. And I would rather go through and do quick rewrites focusing on one thing, because I know my brain can pay attention to that. But if you're trying to look at relationship, dialogue, action, scene heading, formatting, spelling, relationship shifts, themes, subplot, if you're trying to do all of that at once, you're going to miss about 50% of it. But if you go through and you're like, let's just spend the weekend, I do an entire run through of my script where I just look at my scene headings. That's it. I just make sure they're all working, they're all written the right way, I'm using a timestamp that's effective for the reader. And then I'll go through and I'll just look at the first action line at the beginning of a scene and the last action line. And I'll go through and just do a dialogue run through. And I'll go through and I'll just do character relationship shifts and see, is there anywhere where I go like too many pages and there hasn't been a shift and I'm like, oh, there's stuff to put in there. But breaking it down so that you're like, no one, even someone who's written 500 scripts, who's been doing it for 90 years, could not go through and take care of all of those things at once. It's not neurologically possible. So just break it down to what you can do and just be like, all right, today I can start going through my script and I'm just going to go through and look at my action lines and just ask myself, of every line of action, first of all, do I need this? Second of all, is there a cooler way that I could write this? This should be dependent upon your genre. If you're writing a thriller, just be like, is there a scarier way I could write this sentence? If it's a romance, is there a more romantic way I could write this sentence? And if you just put the focus on one thing and you're just like, I just have to do this one thing on every page, you'll be able to get through a rewrite quicker with less suffering. And yeah, you will probably add more drafts that you have to do, but I would rather do 100 drafts that I feel good about and are fun than do 7 drafts that are absolutely torturous and painful and make me feel like I'm not smart enough to actually get this done. So I've got about 3 minutes before I have to go in and teach a new 3-hour class on TV pilot, because I thought that this was happening at 1 p.m. New York time and I made a mistake. Totally my mistake. Is there any final last thing or moment that anyone—
Do you want to say a few words about your mentorship program?
Oh.
There's people asking about it. How do you get in? Are you reading the scripts?
Okay.
Is there a wait list?
Right. Yes. Actually, I do this all the time, you guys. I get so excited about teaching you guys stuff that I forget to be like, here's a discount code, or like, okay. So the way I work right now, my one-on-one spots are filled, but we always take a list so that the next time a spot opens up, if you want to work. So you can find that on the website. it doesn't cost any money just to like put your information in or whatever. It's just like, if a spot opens up, we go to that list before we start opening things up to anyone else. I then do classes. They're the easiest, most awesome entry point. It's like this, only there's usually 8 of you and I can see your faces. There's one class I do that's big in mass, and by big, I mean 20 people, but most of the classes are quite small. We have a few coming up. There's the meditative one, which is clearly we're using meditation, and it's a mix of artistic health and process and like working with your inner writer and with resistance and stuff. And then also doing writing moving forward. On the other side, there's the screenplay alchemy class, which is more of like this stuff where we will be looking at a section of your pages. You will be workshopping them in the group. We will be talking about your project. And then there's other stuff on there. If you go to meditativewriting.org/classes, that sort of has everything that's going on, and you can look at what's of interest to you. I mean, I also will do one-time script consultations. I prefer to do continual one-on-one work with people because it's more effective for training them. And those, I only do 10 of those a year. So there's like 2 left for the year. But if you go to meditativewriting.org, I believe the website's laid out pretty cleanly. So I hope that that's good. And if you guys want totally free stuff, if you're like, Jessica, 2020 has destroyed me, I'm not buying anything, that's okay. Because first of all, I'll always do some things like this. Like I love working with ISA and with like New York City Women Filmmakers to do free events because that's something I care about. But also my Instagram, you guys, my Instagram is free. I mean, it's Instagram. I don't know if people pay, but like, I swear if you're ever stuck, there's over 600 quotes of little nuggets that are really just like, if you're stuck and you just breeze through that Instagram, you're going to find something on there that's like, oh, this is going to get me unstuck. And so that you have access to anytime, not my personal Instagram, but the meditative writing. So it's at meditative writing or meditative_writing. I mean, you can follow me, but you're just going to see pictures of my cat. So that's not going to be as helpful. My cats, sorry, oh my God, Freudian slip.
They're cute,
oh
though.
God. Do I love one of them more than the other? I don't know. No, I do. They're both amazing. But yeah, so at meditative_writing, like I said, it's got over 600 little nuggets of me being like, how do I sum up in one sentence something that could like break someone who's stuck, like break them past a moment and get them writing again. And so that I feel like is the best place to go just for, because again, like even if you're in a class, you don't have access to me 24 hours a day, but you're the Instagram, you're just like, anytime you're like, oh yeah, that's what I need to be focusing on right now. So thank you guys so much. This really has been very fun. I hope it was helpful to everyone. I know sometimes I can be all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who is on this call that didn't have their minds blown today. This was just fantastic information. So many actionable things to take and start writing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks everybody for being on the call, on the class. Jess, we can't wait to do it again with you. Have a great class tonight.
And I can't wait to do it again in person.
I know.
So hopefully next year, you know, I would love to meet some of you awesome people, you know, in person and see your faces.
Yes. A quick before we go, we have a bunch of events coming up. So please check our events page. September 11th, inclusive storytelling. September 17th, third Thursdays, we're talking about writing groups. September 27th, writing with the law of attraction. September 30th, a class just right now with Suzanne Gunderson, talking about clearing blocks and focusing on the work. Fantastic events, please check them out. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and a good evening.